Hello, welcome to Merchant Center Optimization Training. My name is Melissa. I work in Dublin at the Google European headquarters, and I work in technical solutions part of Google here. It's very sunny and beautiful in Dublin at the moment. I hope you have a really nice Friday yourselves and the week has gone smoothly so far. I know it must be a busy season for many of you. So for some of you, if you already joined on Wednesday, you might know a bit what we're going to go through today. So basically Wednesday was contributed a bit more to the troubleshooting part of Merchant Center. And today we're going to try to look a tiny bit to the optimization part. Of course, there is a lot of overlapping there as well. So if you still want to, you haven't seen the first one that we did on Wednesday, you can also just find that training on YouTube, and you can go back to it as well if you want to. So yes, let's hop into the optimization part of Merchant Center. So today what we're going to learn is basically to kind of see like what is actually useful when it comes to Merchant Center, what is the most important information to also basically put on the feeds, and how that then functions together with AdWords, so that we could basically get the product shown as well as possible with the best high quality data. Just a second. Let's see if my slides actually work today. Perfect. So basically, I'm going to just give you a few tools in the sense of that if you want to kind of learn also to how to manage Merchant Center a bit more effectively. It's just very few simple tips for that, as we already talked about it on Wednesday as well. So Merchant Center is a data processing tool. So in that sense, there are a limited amount of things that also can be done with Merchant Center, but a few things will really help you to get on your way. Then there are some automated tools and settings that you can use on Merchant Center to kind of make it a tiny bit easier. So these are updates that have actually come to Merchant Center only in the last year, most of them actually. So if you're not already using those and you've been using Merchant Center for a longer period of time, now it's a good checkup to take a look at those settings as well and see how basically you can minimize the effort that you also have to put into, for example, updating of different attributes. Then we're going to also talk a tiny bit about optimizing the feeds and the campaigns, and basically how to do that and what are the keys for optimizing both of those. All right, so let's get into it. This is basically the layout that we're going to go through in terms of just the very technicalities of it. And I'm just going to run through basically what is a multi-client account, all sorts of different account level settings, some language and currency things that we're going to talk about as well. Account limit increases, and then overall just basically how shopping works and what is essential for it, and that's kind of in the light of optimization. So what is important in optimization in order to get the best possible results also then on shopping showing up. All right. So multi-client account. Probably many of you are already very familiar with it. However, it is a bit of a concept that also causes a lot of headaches, as it is a bit different to AdWords, and we are quite often just used to how basically merchant manager accounts work in AdWords. So multi-client is a tiny bit different to that. And so as Merchant Center is a data processing tool, basically this multi-client account is meant for managing all those different data sets together. So what is a multi-client account? It kind of enables management of multiple domains at a large scale. So basically multi-client accounts allow us to create several different feeds for multiple different domains. So as we talked on Wednesday already, basically when you start a Merchant Center account, there's always the verification and claiming of the site that is extremely important when you start a Merchant Center account. That's the very basic of starting an account. So for that, for instance, if you would have different domains for different countries, for instance, then it would be good to kind of create a separate Merchant Center account for all those different domains, and then have those under, for example, a multi-client account. So meaning that basically with one email, you can log in, and after that, you can basically shuffle between all the different accounts, and you can even get an overview of all the different accounts that you have. So especially if you're targeting several countries, that is really useful for that. Then So also, so like I said, it's also for basically management of multiple sellers at scale. So this is also something that is extremely useful for agencies, and so many of you are very, very aware of that, and why this is a very handy tool. The difference then is that actually confuses a lot as well is that basically you can also have several feeds within one account. So basically you can target many countries with just one account, and that all comes down to basically what kind of website do you have. So if you have one domain and you have kind of then over on that domain, you can, for example, change the language of the website. In those cases, you can just basically upload all the different feeds for all the different countries to one account. So then you can basically have the overview of the whole business on that one account, and you don't need to shuffle between different ones. So there are kind of two ways to do that, and it entirely depends on your setup. So if ever in doubt, please do give us a ring, and we can take a look at your specific website and give our recommendation on that as well. So basically, how the multi-client account, like you can have a multi-client account, is basically that you just contact us requesting a multi-client account. This request has to come from the admin of the current account. So basically, multi-client account is something that is created on top of an already existing Merchant Center account. So in order to get a multi-client account, you will have to have a Merchant Center account already. So when you have a Merchant Center account and you request us as the admin of that account, in those cases, we can basically create a multi-client account. So the original account that you had becomes a sub-account. Your login email will also then automatically transform to the upper level. So that's basically the only criteria in terms of creating a multi-client account at that stage. Yeah, and so wait, so let me just see also what the notes of mine are here. So yeah, so there are also possibilities to basically claim the sites on kind of like a higher level in Merchant Center accounts. So there might be some issues when you are doing those claims on the lower, on the basically normal Merchant Center accounts. So let's say that, for example, you have a business that was owned by one agency and is coming under your agency. There might be that, so the agency before had claimed this specific business. So they had this claiming and verification of the URL. When that business moves to you, for instance, you also have to do the claiming and verification. So in those cases, it's good to use the top domain. So basically also what I mentioned on Wednesday a bit. So it's good to use a top domain in that case, because you might also get a notification that there is already another kind of a manager for that specific account and that URL. So if you ever come across any problems with verification and claiming, always use a top domain, and that will basically sort out your issues in light of just a normal Merchant Center account or multi-client account or any transfer issues, anything. So just remember to basically try out that one first, and if that doesn't work, then of course do contact us, and we can take a look at what is going on there in the background. So how do you request this? There is actually a form in Merchant Center account on in the Merchant Center Help Center, and via that form you can request that. So there's just a few details we need with that. So it's mainly the admin email of the Merchant Center account, as well as just a few details of like what is the purpose of basically getting this multi-client account. So with that form, basically, we will then get in touch with you if everything's okay and we manage to create you a multi-client account. So then the second part of that is that when you have these different accounts, then it's the linking and unlinking of Merchant Center accounts that causes a lot of hassle usually. So we see quite a lot of cases regarding this, just because it is a bit tricky. Basically, it comes down to having the right admin approvals. And for that, as a reminder as well, is that Merchant Center indeed is a data processing tool. So basically, it doesn't have a memory. It's very easy to basically start a new account as well. Basically, with this saying, the linking and unlinking of accounts might be a bit tricky because that requires approvals from different admins. if you are actually in a rush to get a Merchant Center account up and running, then the best option definitely is to just start a new account. So if you have like a multi-client account, you can already create another Merchant Center account, like a sub account, just via that very easily. You do the claiming and verification, you upload the feed, and you're up and running again, basically. So that is the basically easiest way to go about it. In the cases where I would recommend kind of unlinking and linking and doing that is that if there are ongoing campaigns, very important ongoing campaigns that you kind of want to maintain. So in the case of those, then it actually makes sense to kind of do the linking and unlinking and make sure that there is basically no pausing, for example, in AdWords end. Yeah, so basically for linking an account to MCA, so let's say that there is a business that has a Merchant Center account and now an agency is taking over this account. Basically, what we need is that we need an authorization from the admin of the account that is going to be linked, and then also from the admin of the multi-client account that is basically going to take over that account. So basically that means that you will get emails from support and we need a written authorization. So a reply to an email with a specific authorization to allow this linking. And as soon as that's done, we can proceed with the linking. Unlinking an account from MCA is then a bit different in the sense that you can create accounts from the multi-client account directly, meaning that like a normal Merchant Center account necessarily doesn't even have an admin email or anything like that, because everything is managed by the kind of manager accounts. So in these cases, if you want to unlink an account, there needs to be an admin on that specific account. So in these cases, before even requesting unlinking, it's good to verify that, for example, for an agency, you have accounts, you have different businesses there, and they want, and one needs to be separated. Just make sure that, for example, that business owner has access to their own Merchant Center account. Basically, you just navigate to the account, you give admin access to the user, and after that, we can basically proceed then with the unlinking. So then again, it's you would have to contact us, and in that case, we just verify that we have all the authorizations from, for example, the admin of the multi-client account as well as of the sub account. And so then also, the more complicated of these things is when, for example, we have a business that moves from one agency to another agency. So then that means that we're unlinking and linking at the same time. In these cases, in order to secure the account, so especially if we are doing these transfers, it usually means that there's something very important going on with the accounts. So it's important that also everything goes very smoothly when we're linking and unlinking. So in those cases, it's always good to have some kind of an admin on the account to make sure that we don't basically lose the account. So in those cases, just add the admin there, contact us, and in those cases, we will have to then contact the old multi-client account manager as well as the new multi-client account admin, as well as then the account itself. So there are a lot of different approvals going through. So in those cases as well, just contact us and just make sure that there's an admin, and then you will just have to reply to a few of our emails and we can get that one sorted after that. Perfect. I hope that cleared something out. Also, you can post questions constantly. I will try to look at them in the end and try to answer them the best way I can. So challenge me in that. And I will just take a look at that. I have someone helping me here and making sure that I also take a look at the questions in the end. So let's move on in the meanwhile. So let's take a look at the account level settings a bit. So there are not that many account level settings, and when it comes to the Nordics, there are a lot of settings that are really optional, so you don't need to even worry about. However, we get some questions regarding shipping, and then of course the automatic item updates that are extremely useful. So we're going to dive into those a tiny bit. So what basically account level settings, so anything that you basically adjust in terms of settings on Merchant Center, basically overrules whatever is happening on the feed. So that is a great way to kind of make these like certain changes at a scale. So for example, shipping settings, they are optional in all of the Nordics. So you can basically choose to have them there or not, and there is no like obligation for that, and you can do that on the account level as well. So for Norway and Sweden, for instance, this can be, for example, a collection, and you can have. So shipping costs is optional, but if you want to have those, you can also then define in the feeds that, for example, they would be to specific locations. So, for example, PostNord, DHL, etc. So there are a few options in both of those countries, and you can use those as the collection, boys, and delivery addresses as well. Shipping is also optional in Denmark. Absolutely no need for that. You can do that if you want to. So basically, also for these account level, like overarching settings, it is possible to do these also on the feed. I would say that it's a tiny bit more complicated, maybe, especially when it comes to setting up shipping settings. It goes into a bit more in technical detail, and so there is, let's say, a greater margin of error in that sense. But if so, I would definitely recommend using the account level ones if possible. That is also something that we can very easily troubleshoot. So this is what we see quite often, that when it is a merchant center and there is a data feed in our side, and when we're trying to help you guys with any technical problems that you have, we don't always have access to the data sets themselves. So when it comes to, for example, this, for us, it's very easy to troubleshoot when we actually can just take a look at the settings on the account, and then we can guide you from there. So up to you, basically, how you want to set it up, or if you want to use it at all. Of course, when for any other countries, so if you're doing, for example, export to any other countries, then there are country-specific requirements, and I recommend for that you to take a look at the Merchant Center Help Center. There is a lot of information on all the technical requirements as well when it comes to shipping settings, and also for tax, for example, if it is for the US or Canada, for instance. So definitely consult those first, as they are a great resource, and then if any doubts, of course, feel free to come to us with questions. All right, and then the very cool feature that was basically just launched last year, and that will be the automatic item updates. Let's see if my slides work again or not. There is no live stream without some technical issues, so sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that, and we're back on live. So I got my slides working again. Yes, going to the absolute my favorite feature, basically, that has come and launched last year for Merchant Center, and that is the automatic item updates. So basically, that is absolutely the best way to avoid problems when it comes to price and availability. So that is something that you can enable just for going to the Merchant Center account. On the top right, in the top right corner, you have 3 dots. You click that, you go to automatic item updates, and you can basically choose if you want to enable this for price or availability, or then for both of them. So it's completely up to you. I highly recommend those. Of course, there is the thing that especially when it comes to microdata, it is good to make sure that that is working correctly. So how do the automatic item updates even work? Basically, there is the microdata that we match. So normally we would match the feed with the microdata on the site. We also look at what's visually on the site, and then on the base of that, we also then send the information to AdWords, and we have that information coming to the ads. With automatic item updates, basically whatever you set as a price or availability on the feed. In addition to that, we look at the microdata on the website, and actually that one overrules whatever is on the feed. So how you will see this in reality is that if you go to any product page or merchant center, you will see there 3 different boxes. So one is what is being picked up from the website, and what is the raw feed attributes, and then the final price and the final attributes. So with those, basically, you can see that what is being picked up from the site would then overrule whatever is on the feed attributes. So really, really handy tool. And of course, for troubleshooting that, there is a structured data testing tool that is very useful and probably the best tool for any quick troubleshooting of this. So without any need to basically look into code to any more specifically. I don't know how your technical skills necessarily are, but that basically doesn't require that much knowledge. It's basically just copy pasting a URL, and it will straight away just show you all the different attributes. So for example, for price and availability. So definitely take those in use, especially with price changes, that if you have price changes a lot, this comes in very, very handy. So yeah, so you can compare these 3 different parts, and also that's the way for you to kind of troubleshoot if there are any issues with that. So definitely take a look at that if you ever have some issues with price. That will be also for us in our end, that will be the first thing that we usually check. Perfect. And so then for kind of language and currency settings a bit. So these are settings that are also kind of account level settings that will also help you to kind of optimize the account a tiny bit. So these settings are mainly there because we want you to also be able to target new countries a bit more easily. So each country has its own language and currency requirements, and actually it's not so, let's say, straightforward. So there are exceptions. So for example, in the Nordic countries, you don't necessarily need to have the feed in the local language. So for example, in Denmark, in Danish, you can also have the feed in English. So do take a look at the requirements of each country, because easily, for example, if you have an English website and an English feed, you can find a huge list of countries that you could actually target just by having the site and the feed in English already. So that's a really, really good tip to go. And also, when you're thinking about exports, you can also use that as a reference on, okay, what are the countries that are basically easiest to go to with all the resources that we already have. So definitely take a look at that. And then for the currency, there is something called currency conversion that is now possible on Merchant Center as well. So basically, that will automatically show ads for the products in another country in the local currency. So basically, this means that there are basically 2 parts to the website as well when you go to a different country. So it's the language part, and then there's the currency part. So for example, converting all those different prices to a new currency. The currency conversion system basically allows you to you need to have the site, unfortunately, still in the requirement languages, but you don't have to worry about the currencies and them necessarily being displayed in the local currency, as there will be an automatic currency conversion. So in that sense, it kind of saves you a tiny bit of hassle in terms of trying to manage several different currencies at the same time in many countries. So, but do note, it still requires the language requirements. So everything, for example, return and refund policy, it's really important to always have available in the kind of local required language. So do remember to check that first. And of course, in addition to that, when you go to new countries, the shipping and tax settings might change as well. So just do a bit of research on those before targeting any country there. So how the price is actually converted, it comes from Google Finance. So we're applying those exchange rates and automatically basically update that with the ads. So in the end, both of the prices will be shown in the ads, as it will always the local currency, so the currency conversion. There is always the kind of margin of error in a sense. There will always be those two different prices, and also we want to kind of show always the original price as well, in order to be as clear to all of the users as possible. So, and also just to note, the currency conversion only applies to shopping at the moment, so only for shopping ads, and it does not function with display campaigns. So if you're doing display with Merchant Center, unfortunately, this is not yet available. Perfect. Then something that we come across, especially if large agencies have a lot of different Merchant Center accounts, or even a business has a lot of Merchant Center accounts and targeting kind of different countries. There's something called account limit increase. So basically, there are some limits to the Merchant Center accounts in terms of how many products can be submitted at a time to the account. And so with this, basically, we are trying to ensure that the data on Merchant Center is useful and in use as well. So there are a few checks when we do. So so like the normal limit usually is like 150K for items, for instance. And in order for that to be, for example, increased, there are a few requirements before we would even raise that, just because we kind of want to make sure that the data is good quality and it's actually being used. So with that, the most important is that basically that increase can happen only if there is kind of a banner that even shows up for you on Merchant Center saying that you have reached your limits, you have reached your quota, you cannot submit any more items. So that will be the first flag, and in that case, basically, there are a few checks that you can do yourself, and then if you tick those boxes, you can then contact us, and we can see if we could get that limit increased. So the most important one that is also very easy for you to check, especially now with the new multi-client account reporting. So basically, you can go to the manager Merchant Center account, and you can very easily see all the disapprovals in all of the accounts that you have. The most important is that there should not be more than 20% of the products that are disapproved. So if you have feeds that you're not using, products that are not like you're not using, or they've expired, or any of this, please make sure to remove those or get those products up and running if there are just errors. Also, just by cleaning the feeds and everything, you might actually free up some space and be able to just continue working with Merchant Center without any increases of the accounts. So just try to keep the Merchant Center data sets as clean as possible, and then it will be also easier for you to manage, as it doesn't have kind of room and time to get messy. Then there are a few more rules to that as well. So basically, these items should also be in use. So you should have basically shopping campaigns that are functioning with these items. And let me see. There's just something, again, a bit funky going on with the slides. Sorry about this. Apparently, like the second time to charm, and we're having problems this time. It went also smoothly on Wednesday, so of course you need to have some issues as well. Just a second when I'm checking that. But But yeah, so for account limit increases, just basically what we want to see is that the product's actually being used, and they are in shopping campaigns, for instance, and there are no disapprovals and no kind of useless products on the account. Yeah, so that's basically for that. And for that, you can just basically ring us up as well. Just send us a message and we will then get in touch with you if there are, if your increase is approved or if there are any issues with that. Perfect. Then in general, let's talk about kind of the serving and the ranking of products. We get quite a bit of questions about that. And to be honest, there is a very simple answer to how products are serving on shopping. So, and I want to kind of talk about that as a basis for before going into the kind of optimization tips. So, in fact, think of shopping campaigns kind of as regular search campaigns. A lot of the same things that you do to kind of optimize search campaigns or any other campaigns that you have, a lot of those same things apply to also shopping campaigns. So basically the way of just doing that optimization and basically doing the edits on the feed instead of the ads, that's what's different. But otherwise, a lot of the same rules and kind of the philosophy still applies. So basically for that we look at the relevance a lot. So we look at the relevance of what you're actually submitting on the feeds and how the products are being described, how are they being categorized. And then after that, we try to basically show them as useful, so the best bits and the most useful ads to the customer that is looking for a specific product. So that's basically it for that. And for what we look at is basically the titles, it's the product, like the Google product categories, it's the GTIN that matters a lot, also the brand, the descriptions, all of that basically matters in that. So also, it's important to kind of have all the different attributes on the feed displayed so that we can have all that information. And on the base of that information, we can kind of make a more sophisticated estimation of when it is useful to show your products on shopping. So that's basically the whole same philosophy as for search campaigns. So how do you then, if there are some kind of like tuning up that you want to do, what would that be? And so it starts from the feed, like I said, and then the campaign settings themselves. So when you kind of bring the items to AdWords and you set up a shopping campaign, that is basically just that campaign just enables the serving and the good delivery of the campaign. But in fact, there is very little that can be done in the kind of the AdWords side, or very little, but there are only a few settings that you can do. So in that sense, all the optimization kind of happens with the feed and the whole data set that you have. And so what affects the serving in general is indeed, it's the feed, it's the bids, it's the budget, and it's the campaign settings. And this is basically that the feed, I would say that that's like absolutely the most important. For starting a campaign, it is insanely important to have a good bid. So quite often we see that it is a very low bid in the beginning. It kind of prevents the campaign from even starting to roll. So I would say that in the beginning, I know that it might feel a bit uncomfortable, but kind of having a bit higher bids in the beginning just to make sure that the campaign launches properly. And we can also then, basically the system can see how the ads are performing and then basically optimize on the base of that. Of course, after that, we can then see if those bids can be lowered and you can optimize it from there. Quite often I'm having conversations about this, as you might be used to having certain prices in one country and then you're starting a shopping campaign in another country and suddenly the campaign is not running with exactly the same bids that you had before. There might be differences. So in terms of competition and the country, there might be huge differences in terms of audience and just supply and demand in that sense. So in that sense, it is, I would not trust to that benchmark in a sense. Of course, I can give you an estimation of what it could be in the future, but just to start off, just have generous bids, as that's mostly what we see causing shopping campaigns not running, especially in the start, properly. And then, of course, as with all the other campaigns, the budget will allow kind of the frequency of like the ad showing as well, so and showing throughout the day. So of course, for that, just like if you have several shopping campaigns as well, just make sure that you have kind of those ones separated, and also take a look at if there is one that's, for example, limited by budget. If there is anything that would be kind of, let's say that there's one campaign that you have that would be performing really well, but it's actually constantly limited by budget, for instance, and you have other shopping campaigns as well. Just try to look into if there's something that you can do to kind of optimize and make sure that you would then have a fair share of how those products are also showing. And then that goes a lot into basically optimization of just the campaign structure that you have. And I will just mention a few things about that a bit later on. But when it comes to campaign settings, there is a few features that have caused a bit of confusion. So there is something that you can set basically the campaign priority in the campaign settings. So when you go to shopping campaigns, there is low, medium, and high priority that you can set for the campaigns. I would say, as a rule of thumb, low, use that very, very rarely. Basically, that would, like if you would have one shopping campaign and you set it as low, you would basically just prevent your own campaign basically from working properly. When you have several campaigns, I would kind of rank them as medium and high priority. And that's usually the setup that I see as well. So for example, a good example would be that you are a reseller as well. So you would have, for example, you would be selling a few brands, but then you would have your own brand on the side. You could have, for example, one campaign that is for the brand, your own brand, and then for the other brands that you're kind of reselling. And then you could basically choose that, okay, the campaign that is for my own brand, I actually value that a lot more. So I'm going to put that as high priority. So if there is a chance for basically an ad to show from one of these campaigns, it will kind of prefer your own brand as opposed to the brands that you're kind of reselling. So that would be a way to kind of prioritize those a tiny bit. But I would say that setting also, like I would not put my kind of life on it either in terms of that being the absolute determinant of your success or not. It's just something, if you have many campaigns, that is good to kind of also just rank the different campaigns and kind of optimize for a specific campaign by setting it, for example, for high priority. All right, so let's take a look at the feed optimization a tiny bit. So that means basically feed optimization is all about the attributes and having high quality data in those attributes. So I'm just going to run a few checks for that. Basically, there are differences when it comes to business type as well. So if you're a retailer, or if you're you're selling, for example, apparel, or you have a B2B kind of business, it really can change how the optimization is done as well. So always have that in mind, and like, what is your audience and what are your products? And for example, do your customers usually look for a brand or a very, very specific product? Those are good things to kind of keep in mind constantly when you are building shopping campaigns. So as a rule of thumb, though, for everything, for any kind of shopping campaign you have, or any kind of merchant center account, any feed, the titles can be up to 150 characters. And to be honest, I would also recommend to have very specific titles with all possible information. So for example, having the size, color, if it's gender specific, so it's, for example, clothes for males and females, you can also mention that on the titles, as that will kind of make sure that the ones who are clicking your ads would also be the real potential customers. However, there is a flip side to it, and that is that the first 70 characters actually show on the ad itself when it is showing on shopping. So when you kind of do those titles, I would pay attention to having the 70 first characters, the most important ones. So the most important attributes. And this is something that can really change from one business to the other. So exactly, try to optimize it for the specific type of products that you're selling as well. So for example, if you're a reseller and you're selling some like very well-known brands, it's good to mention the brand first. If it's a specific type of a product, a very specific product, maybe that's good to mention first. So it's, for example, parts to some kind of devices or anything like very kind of technical. Maybe then that would be the best way to go about it. So with that as well, I wouldn't say that there is an ultimate answer to it, like what is the best one. There are some guidelines though. If you go to the Merchant Center Help Center, took a screenshot of it as well. So there are basically all those different tips for optimizing for different types of businesses as well. So there are some like general guidelines of like how we've seen shopping working the best for example, B2B business or so. So you can use that as a reference, but definitely also for that, like take that as also with a grain of salt, because I would say still there are huge differences with businesses, and necessarily a business would not fall into a specific category like that either. So definitely just basically I would recommend to try out different kinds of titles, different kinds of formats for the titles, and see what works the best. So one of those would be, for example, that we see quite often for apparel is the brand, the product type, and then, for example, the size. Those would be the kind of most essential ones that we would see, for example, for those kind of products. So basically play along with those. And of course, there are differences when it comes to languages as well. So if you're, for example, targeting, like you have the feed in English, it might be completely different if you're targeting if you have the feed in German or Italian. So like also just have that in mind, and it's good. Those things are really good to check also with kind of natives, and try to check what will be the most relevant way to bring that information to the customers. In addition to that, of course, being very consistent with sizing and colors really gets you far. So instead of having really kind of unique color names, for instance, it's good to use something that is quite consistent, what is usually in the market, because quite often we will see also that customers, when they go on shopping, they will search for example, a specific product in a specific color. So in those, they would use also the most general ones. It kind of goes all the way to kind of the same optimization as for search. So trying to have the same information on the site, in the ads, so basically in the feed here, and in the attributes. And so basically having that all aligned as well as possible to the user search. Then, of course, if you have, so I have an example there, for example, in the photo, for example, having an item group ID. So basically it would be good to submit every single product separately. So any different size, any color, etc. Those would be their own product IDs and their own items in the feed. However, you can then group them together with the item group ID. So then basically when you go to shopping, you can even try that out yourself. You can then kind of see, if you click one open, there's something called like more information on the product. You get kind of carousel of photos, so that's also for the additional images, but then you also see options for example, different sizes. So that is great for having kind of more informative shopping ad in general. So definitely use that if you have, for example, apparel or any kind of different sizes like that. Then in general, we would recommend always use the most specific Google product category as possible. So you can be a bit more general or a bit more granular when it comes to the Google product category. The more specific, the better, because also then kind of the systems can optimize a tiny bit better, as then it's also sure of like what the product would be. I know that might cause some extra work for some of you, but I really recommend doing that, as it's kind of that in combination with, for example, brand and the GTIN, so or EAN code or ISBN, so the product identifier. Those work together basically and determine a lot of it, like if a product is showing on shopping and how. Then in general, so there are some merchants as well that use, for example, a bit grayish backgrounds. To be honest, we always recommend using plain white background and having it very clear, so that and that's basically how we've seen the best results come out as well. So and also because the majority of the market is showing their products on a white background, that would also make it a tiny bit more coherent on what's shown on shopping. There are some different requirements for photos. So as I mentioned actually on Wednesday, there are a tiny bit of different requirements for those. You can check the exact requirements on the Merchant Center Help Center, but basically as a rule of thumb, have as high quality image as possible, and also have several of those images. So as the main primary image link in the feed, do have the product basically on a white background, plainly just the product itself. In the additional images and the additional image links, you can then have something like a bit more, like let's say innovative photos as well. So for example, with kind of signs of measurement or something like this. There's also a list of that like existing in the Help Center if you wish to look at all the different kind of photo variations that you could have there. But basically it's a lot more relaxed when it comes to the additional image links. So also like in the example that's on the slide now of the bag, so there could be, for example, one image that is also of a person carrying the bag, and so on. Perfect. And so in general, kind of as to summarize the whole Merchant Center optimization is that it's really dependent on the business and targeting. And so in that sense, I know that it is a bit challenging to optimize it. And we have kind of two rules of thumb for that. And that is that they're to make trials with shopping campaigns. So try different kinds of groupings of products. So having different products separated into different campaigns, having them in one campaign, having different kinds of bids, what kind of works the best. Then also trying out with different bidding strategies. So having, for example, one campaign with target CPA, another one with enhanced CPC, etc. So you could really like try out which one works the best there. With shopping campaigns, it's a bit more tricky in the sense that you cannot set up experiments the same way as for other campaigns. So I understand in that sense that it takes a tiny bit more effort, but that's definitely, if you want to really, really go nitty-gritty in the optimization of shopping campaigns, trials would be good to try those different kinds of bidding strategies, and also with for example, the titles. So trying out different kinds of titles, different orders, and that might help you already a lot. And then I guess like in the bottom line for that is that try to just understand the target audience and organize the campaigns accordingly. So exactly, are they looking for a very specific product usually? Or are they looking for something a bit more generic? Are they looking for the brand name and for example, a dress, or are they looking for a specific kind of a dress, or are they looking for the brand, are they looking for the brand, or just in general any kind of a dress? Try to look into these, and for this, of course, for example, any kind of e-commerce tracking is extremely useful, and I would say like essential if you're doing shopping. Any of that kind of tracking really gives you good insights on also how to then organize the campaigns. Is it per brand, and also in that sense, like, is it like what makes sense to the business? So is it, do you care more about what is the instant revenue, like straight away? What is the immediate investment of the customer, or is it more about the returning customers and kind of having the lifetime value of them? So what makes sense to your business goals is also kind of what determines the campaign structure there and how you want to set that up. Yeah, so that is general. So basically, if I would need to summarize in 2 sentences, it's basically focus on the feed if you want to optimize, and that optimization basically applies to absolutely every type of campaign in a sense. And then when it comes to the campaign setup itself, that requires a tiny bit more kind of trial and error as well. That requires looking into what are your business goals, and then also just looking into what is the audience and how do they look for your products. All right, I'm just going to check if there are any questions showing up. Let me just see quickly that. All right. So if you have any questions, you are absolutely free. I'll just hang around for a bit if you have absolutely any questions in mind. And if not, then I guess we're just going to go and spend our weekends. So I hope that was useful. This one also will be, this training will also be on YouTube afterwards, so you can also return back to it. The Merchant Center Help Center is the absolute best resource for any kind of technical details of any type of optimization. So definitely take a look at that. And then, of course, when it comes to this optimization part, a lot of it is also aligned with any kind of troubleshooting issues. So in that sense, I really recommend also taking a look at the first session if you didn't look at that, just because it kind of gives you also an overview of how you can prevent all those disapprovals, and in that sense optimize as well. And especially if you go into different countries as well, there might be some issues that you're facing that you haven't met before. The troubleshooting guide is kind of good for that as well, to start going for the troubleshooting there. Perfect. So I don't think we got any questions this time. Then I just thank you for joining the training, and I wish you just a very nice weekend. It's super sunny, blue sky in Dublin. Doesn't happen that often, so I'm just gonna really take the most of it myself. I hope you have a really nice weekend, and yeah, see you around.